Welcome back to Cinema Chronicles, the channel that brings a cinematic feel to history and real stories of life behind hardened communities. This is part 2 of a 10-part series exploring how Jamaican politicians built the island's political garrisons and how those same garrisons became deeply tied to Jamaican politics. In this episode, we will meet the men who ruled the JLP communities. Men like Claudie Massop and Jim Brown from Tivoli Gardens, and Curly Locks from Rima. These weren't just political operatives, they were urban generals. There were many other garrisons, most of them not freshly built like Tivoli or Jungle, but rather existing neighborhoods that were renamed, repopulated, and reprogrammed to serve the two major political parties. The transformation wasn't always about construction. Sometimes it was just about claiming ground, shifting the people, the energy, and the allegiance. For every garrison created, an adversary was manufactured. In the East Nannyville, the PNP stronghold tucked behind the National Stadium found itself in frequent clashes with Backbush, a hardened JLP area just a stone's throw away. The two communities became rival posts in a deadly political tug-of-war, with boundaries drawn not by fences but by fear. In central Kingston, Southside, a long-time JLP base constantly battled with the PNP communities of Tel Aviv and Dunkirk. What once were old neighborhoods now became barricaded zones where the wrong color shirt or slang could cost you your life. The names themselves, borrowed from war zones abroad, reflected the battles being fought at home. Fletcher's Land, AJLP stronghold, warred with Almontown, while Waterhouse, another volatile PNP area in western Kingston, found itself clashing with the JLP Tower Hill, often over party lines, turf claims, and personal vendettas backed by political power. The divides were sharp, and they weren't just on maps. They were felt in every schoolyard, every dance hall, and every football match. It was a cycle of mirrored violence. For every political foothold gained, the other side would carve out its answer. And while it started in Kingston, it didn't stay there. By the late 1970s, this system of garrison and rival enclaves had spread beyond the capital. Spanish Town soon became a second battleground, absorbing the same blueprint of divided communities. Communities like Rivoli and De La Vega became hardened PNP areas, while Towspen and its surrounding areas were firmly JLP aligned. By the time the 1980 election campaign rolled around, even rural Jamaica began to feel the pressure to choose sides, not just in ideology, but in loyalty, land, and life. However, no area in Jamaica bore the brunt of political violence more than the Kingston Western Police Division. This single zone, home of both Tivoli Gardens and Jungle, was a political powder keg. Within it lived entire colonies of loyalists, tightly controlled and deeply entrenched in rivalry. Add to that another dangerous territory, like Matthews Lane, and the region quickly turned into a battleground. Some parts became no man's land, abandoned, bullet-riddled, and ruled by fear. The police, often outgunned and outnumbered, couldn't maintain order. It was the gangs who dictated who lived where and who didn't. People were chased from their homes, shot for their affiliations, or silenced for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The street armies weren't just neighborhood cliques. They were organized killing machines, loyal not just to their communities, but to the political parties. Each gang had its own code, soldiers, and weapons. But they were all puppets in a bigger war between green and orange. Then there were the men behind the firepower. Street legends, Dawns, Warlords. Claudie Massop, the first don of the garrisons. Claudie Massop stood tall and burly, the undisputed JLP enforcer of Tivoli Gardens. In West Kingston, there was only one man more powerful than Massop, and that was Edward Sayaga himself, the JLP opposition leader and member of parliament for the constituency. If Tivoli was the Garden of Eden, then Edward Sayaga was God. Massop also went by the nickname Jack, which most of his cronies called him. He was the original founder of the Phoenix Gang, which eventually evolved into the infamous Shower Posse under Jim Brown. By 1967, at the age of 18 years old, his gang was already active in the area that had just started construction to become Tivoli Gardens. At the time, They were engaged in war with the motorcycle gang led by Burry Boy and Feather Mop from the area that eventually became Jungle. The Phoenix Gang mashup created was based in Tivoli Gardens, Denham Town, and Rema, forming a green wall of labyrinth support in West Kingston throughout the late 1960s and into the 1970s. Mashup was actually born in Denham Town, one of the long-standing communities in Kingston. And like Jonestown, both existed long before they became involved in the political fray. At the time of his birth, there was no Tivoli Gardens yet. Like many of the other figures in this series, Mashup had been to jail from a young age. Mashup was charged with murder at one point, but walked free. In many of these cases, political influence helped, but sometimes it was simply that people were too afraid to identify these figures in police lineups. While Claudius Mashup was undoubtedly a gangster, many saw him as more forward-thinking than his counterparts. Though not quite a revolutionary, he seemed more open to the ideas of peace and stability. His major role in the 1978 peace treaty supports this idea. Some say Mashup didn't always subscribe to the violence that came with his position, but being in the role he was in, he had little choice. He was also very close to reggae legend Bob Marley. Like many of the other major political enforcers of the era, figures like Mashup, Tony Welch, and others had either all grown up together or crossed paths long before they chose different political allegiance. That closeness helped make the 1978 peace treaty possible. But we will dive into this event in another episode. Mashup died a year after the peace treaty. He didn't live to see the 1980 election, the bloodiest in Jamaican history. His death was controversial. Though the PNP was in power in 1979, there were whispers of a fallout between Mashup and JLP leader Edward Syaga. Despite not being the ruling party, Syaga and the JLP still had enormous influence over sectors of the security forces. Some people who lived in Tivoli at the time believed that Mashup's murder was politically motivated. He reportedly had some Rastafarian leanings, like many others who stayed clear of ties with foreign intelligence agencies, such as the CIA. This became a point of conflict. In contrast, Jim Brown, Mashup's successor, was said to be far more aligned with Syaga and his allies, including the CIA, who wanted a new Tivoli Don. Mashup died on February 4, 1979. According to newspapers' reports from that time, he was shot more than 40 times by members of the police force. He wasn't alone. 2 other men were killed with him after returning from a football match in Portmore, St. Catherine. The place of his death adds another chilling layer of meaning. He was gunned down just outside Tivoli Gardens on the corner of Marcus Garvey Drive and Industrial Terrace. For those familiar with Kingston's layout, Industrial Terrace is one of the main roads that leads directly into Tivoli Gardens. In other words, Mashup died just steps from the very garrison he helped create and control. This happened only a couple of months before Hot Steppers gang member and Jamaica's most wanted, Dennis Copper, Bart, was killed. But Mashup was not wanted at the time of his death. His violent death, the excessive gunfire, and the highly public nature of the killing have long fueled suspicions that it was not just a routine police operation, but an orchestrated hit. A move to clear the way for Jim Brown, the man who would soon rule Tivoli with an iron fist. Mashup's death marked the end of one era, and the beginning of another that was more ruthless, more militarized, and more entangled with international interests like the CIA. He will always be remembered as one of the original gangsters, the original leader of Tivoli Gardens. Although it wasn't the mother of all garrisons under his watch, Mashup steered Tivoli through most of the PNP years from 1972 to 1980. He kept Tivoli Gardens under one rule and kept the peace. Still, while doing drive-bys into PNP zones like Jonestown, Hannahtown, and Jungle, he was intelligent enough to see when there was a time for peace and didn't fight against it. But that intelligence was probably what cost him his life. Mashup is now remembered in Tivoli by murals on walls and an annual street dance to commemorate his life. He was laid to rest at Maypen Cemetery, still watching over Tivoli Gardens in the afterlife. But Claudie wasn't alone. The JLP's machinery also included feared names like Curly Locks. Curly Locks, the forgotten warrior of Rima. Born in West Kingston, Howard Hewitt, better known by the streets as Curly Locks, came from a stretch of land that was once called Newtown, a volatile space where Rima met Denhamtown and Jonestown touched Hannahtown. This crossroads, where the red and green political zones bled into one another, eventually became known as No Man's Land, a dangerous, deserted buffer zone caught between gunfire, ideology, and fear. As a boy, Curly Locks wasn't always destined for the gun. He was known as a church-going youth, quiet, respectful, and spiritual. But after his family relocated into Rima in the late 1960s, everything changed. In those years, Rima was a powder keg, and the man running it was Pushwood, a powerful gangster and early leader of the Rima 13 gang. Pushwood took young Howard under his wing, not just mentoring him in the ways of the street, but teaching him to ride a Honda 50 motorbike, and slowly pulling him away from the pulpit and into the shadows. Curly Locks' nickname came not from Rastafarian dreadlocks, as some assumed, but from his Haffandian heritage. His hair curled in tight Indian coils, a trait he shared with another prominent don from the opposite side of the political divide, General Starkey of Jungle. Despite their rivalry, the two shared this common background and strong political conviction. General Starkey for the PNP and Curly Locks for the JLP. By the mid-1970s, after Pushwood's death, Curly Locks became the undisputed leader of the Rima 13 gang and the garrison's political general. His rise came at a time when Rima was under siege. Sandwiched between Jungle and Tivoli, Rima was a punching bag on the front line, the stepchild, loyal but often left to fend for itself, while Tivoli was Sayaga's favorite child, well supplied and reinforced. Yet, if you ask any elder from the Kingston streets, they will tell you the same thing. Rima fought harder than any garrison in the 1970s. They had to. Jungle was right next door. The gunfire was constant. The pressure never let up. And leading the resistance was Curly Locks. Locks would also go on the attack, putting pressure on the Mexico housing scheme in Jungle at the 7th Street borderline. If there was some kind of award or Medal of Honor to be given to a Labarite during the 1970s as the bravest and who fought the hardest, it had to go to Locks. He was no puppet don. He, who was the frontliner, the man holding down the barricades when Jungle gunmen launched nightly incursions. His men were hardened fighters, but lacked the firepower of Tivoli or Jungle. So, when necessary, Rima teamed up with Tivoli for weaponry and reinforcement. But make no mistake, Curly Locks led his own war. Locks didn't just make his name fighting rival gunmen. His gang was notorious for daring payroll robberies. He also had a long history of engaging in shootouts with Jamaica's security forces. In the 1970s, he was charged with armed robbery, a serious charge that could have ended his reign. But like many dons of the era, he beat the charges, gaining even more street credit in the process. After his release, he traveled to North America and Europe, proof that he had connections or passports that most ghetto youth could only dream of. But violence followed him wherever he went. According to street law, during his time abroad, Curly Locks was involved in a deadly altercation, reportedly shoving a man off a building during a dispute. The fallout from the incident forced him to flee back to Jamaica, where he resumed his post in Rima, more infamous than ever. Despite being a JLP loyalist, like Claudie Massop and Jim Brown, Curly Locks operated in his own brutal lane. He was respected by both men, but not just for his leadership or political conviction. They feared and admired his lust for blood. Street whispers often said, Curly Locks enjoyed the war too much, that he wasn't just fighting to survive, but thrived in the violence. Some said he was a madman, and it was proven in one of the most legendary moments in Curly Locks' life. It came when Minister of Housing Tony Spalding, with backing from Tony Welch and armed junglists, attempted to forcibly evict Rima residents under the guise of unpaid government fees. On the border of 7th Street, a planned ambush was waiting. But Curly Locks and his men disguised themselves in red and black, the colors of the junglists, and infiltrated the invading group. When the moment came, they turned on them with knives and fists, forcing the attackers to retreat. In the confusion, Rima stood its ground. Again, for all his brutality, loyalty, and legendary status, Curly Locks was still a man vulnerable to the same code of betrayal that defined the garrisons. One of the darkest whispers that followed him was the story that he shot his pregnant baby mother in a fit of rage. Whether the tale was fully true or embellished by fear, it only added to his mythos as a man capable of anything. In 1981, just months after the JLP's sweeping victory in the 1980 election, Curly Locks was gunned down by a young thug from Tivoli Gardens, known as Paperman. He had traveled to Tivoli to see Jim Brown, who was distributing checks. At the gate, he encountered Paperman, a youth who had heard of Curly Locks but may not have recognized him. Curly Locks was disrespected. He later found Paperman and pistol-whipped him in retaliation. Weeks later, while riding his Honda motorbike in West Kingston, Curly Locks was shot and killed, reportedly by Paperman. He died at the hands of the very community he had once fought to protect. It was a bitter irony, but not uncommon in the garrisons, where political colors often blurred into personal vendettas and egos unchecked by hierarchy. Curly Locks held the line in Rima, fighting off relentless attacks from neighboring jungle throughout the turbulent decade of PNP rule. These weren't distant enemies. Jungle and Rima are two sub-communities of Trenchtown, separated only by a narrow stretch of asphalt called 7th Street. It was on this street, just a few meters wide, that lives were lost, borders defended, and politics enforced. But Curly Locks did not die on this street, and he did not die by the hands of his enemies. He was killed by the same people he defended. And then there was Jim Brown. Jim Brown, Lester Lloyd Coke, the making of a Don. Jim Brown, born Lester Lloyd Coke, is most famously remembered as the enforcer, king of Tivoli Gardens, and the brutal architect of the Shower Posse. But his earliest years paint a very different story, one that starts on the other side of the political divide. Raised in Denhamtown, Jim Brown grew up in a community that, at the time, leaned towards the PNP. The area had not yet been fully pulled under Tivoli's green umbrella, and in those early days, Brown was reportedly aligned with the People's National Party. Acting as a young enforcer and street soldier, he wasn't alone. General Starkey, one of the PNP's most militant dons, was also from the same section of West Kingston. Lizardtown, a rugged neighborhood that sat in Tivoli's shadow. Some say Lizardtown was merely next to Tivoli, while others claimed it was part of Tivoli. But what's more intriguing is that Jim Brown and General Starkey were rumored to be blood relatives. If that connection is true, then it makes even more sense that Jim Brown's early loyalties were orange, especially during a time when Starkey himself was deeply rooted in the PNP struggle. But then everything changed. At age 19, Brown was badly wounded in a political shootout. According to street law, his PNP comrades abandoned him, leaving him to die. But help came from the most unexpected place. JLP-affiliated doctors and handlers from Tivoli Gardens, who took him in and treated his injuries. That betrayal by the PNP and the rescue by the JLP marked the turning point of his life. From that moment on, Lester Coke became Jim Brown, and Tivoli Gardens became his base. He aligned himself fully with Edward Seaga and quickly rose through the JLP's street ranks during the 1970s. He officially became an enforcer for the JLP and joined forces with Claudie Massop's Phoenix Gang, which, at the time, was the dominant political crew operating out of Tivoli Gardens. Brown was fiercely loyal and extremely violent, quickly earning a reputation as a man who didn't hesitate to pull the trigger. After Claudie Massop's death, Jim Brown would go on to take over Tivoli Gardens. His control was absolute. Edward Seaga himself once described Jim Brown as a protector of Tivoli Gardens' poor, a quote that spoke to Brown's dual identity as both feared gangster and local benefactor. In 1976, Jim Brown's name became attached to one of the most infamous incidents in Jamaican history, the attempted assassination of reggae icon Bob Marley. Though never proven, there were persistent rumors that Brown was involved in the shooting at Marley's Hope Road residence, which left the singer, his wife Rita, and manager Don Taylor injured just days before the historic Smile Jamaica concert. The whispers added to Brown's growing reputation as a ruthless and politically connected figure, someone whose reach extended far beyond the borders of Tivoli Gardens. It was said that Marley told his close friends he had seen the man who shot him before. Marley, like many Rastas at the time, was aligned with the thinking and politics of Michael Manley. So, the idea of being shot by Jim Brown wasn't far-fetched. Jim Brown's story is one of violent transformation, from abandoned foot soldier to Tivoli strongman, from potential PNP asset to JLP legend. His story and leadership of the Shower Posse will continue later on in this series. Join me next time for the PNP Dons and Warlords Bury Boy and Feather Mob, Tony Welch, George Flash, and Tony Brown, Bucky Marshall, and General Starkey. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notifying bell for more of this content.